So, actually, is it calm if we speak about you and yourself personally?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned that you're Jewish, right? How do we look on there, by the way?
Oh, you guys look fine.
All right, cool.
Yeah,
So you mentioned that you're
yeah.
Jewish. Is that something, do you identify with that strongly?
Not like super strong, but like I identify as Jewish, yeah, because
Okay.
of my grandma and like her cultural identity and the stuff that she still believes in, and so like ethnically.
So she's still with us?
She's like a mix. So she also had the thing where
she's still with us.
Oh yeah, she's still with us in terms of that being alive. She had a bit of a cultural conversion to Christianity. Then she was an atheist at one point. And now she's kind of like a mix of all three, really. So like her household is a mix of like Judeo-Christian values and like objects, really.
Fair enough.
Because her Judaism is, when she came here, she was her parents told her never to tell anybody she was Jewish because it was just right before the Holocaust and the aftermath. So to be Jewish was a scary thing. So she didn't really talk about it until way after her dad was dead.
What year are we talking about?
I think like her dad moved here in like 1930s, like 34, 35.
Oh, okay.
He saw stuff coming on the horizon and was like, I'm going to get out of Europe and go somewhere.
You sort of foresaw what was going to happen in
Yeah.
Her dad?
Yeah, her dad. And then she was born here. And then,
Where was that, in Birmingham?
I'm trying to think, where was it? I think Luton.
Okay.
Luton, yeah.
Oh, wow. So not far from my...
Yeah, she's a Luton girl. I did take her. We did take her back there once, and she was like, "Really, it's not the same."
Fair enough.
In what way would you say Luton's not the same now?
I mean, I'll put it this way: I don't know anybody who has enjoyed moving this a bit closer.
That's fine.
Cool.
It looks better that way, innit?
Yeah, I don't know anybody who's enjoyed going to Luton recently. I mean, I don't mind it, but I know lots of from my friends who used to live there. They don't live there no more. You know, they tell me it's insane. They tell me they don't feel comfortable there. My grandma just said it had changed too much. She didn't really go into what those changes were. But, I mean, any area changes over the course of... the UK has changed in every conceivable way since the time she was a child. I mean, when she was a child, Britain was at war with Germany.
Oh.
You know. We're not doing that anytime soon, I don't think.
Did she ever
Hopefully
speak
not.
about, like, presumably the fear and the... Because people moved out of London to hide.
So she
the
did.
Evacuations.
Yeah, she moved to Coventry for a little bit, which also wasn't a good idea because it also got bombed a lot. Coventry was one of the most bombed cities. And afterwards, she was on Coventry's outskirts, so she was mostly okay. But she didn't experience that too. Because she was only like 5 or 6 when World War II kind of was going on.
5 or 6?
Yeah.
What's that?
I'm trying to think, like 5 or 6 years old when World War II was going on. So she doesn't remember. Like she remembers some parts of it, but not vividly. My granddad's a lot older. He's another 5 years plus. He remembers a lot more. Okay. He remembers the fear, and of course. So, for example, one of the things that's quite unique about him is he's afraid of the dark. Really? Even at this age, he's not actually afraid of the dark, but from me talking to him, it's essentially PTSD.
Yeah.
But obviously, it didn't exist back then. He's never had it dark nose, of course. But when I've asked him what he's actually afraid of, it loops back to like him saying, "Oh, I used to go to bed afraid I'd get blown up." And one day he woke up, went outside. His auntie lived across the road. Her house was blown up.
Oh, wow.
I think she actually survived in the end. But like that was terrifying.
I wanted
enough.
to even ask you now that you just said that, how much of that is fear or reality? How much of that was reality and how much of that was propaganda?
So yeah, I was gonna say it is real because both my nan and granddad lived next to places that got blown up. So definitely
traumatic.
So definitely real. So yeah, you're going.
Because even then, not to even cut you off.
Yeah.
Like historically speaking, during World War II, the brunt of the force was on France, Poland. Obviously, Japan was nuked. A lot of different things were going on all over the world, in Africa especially, but Britain specifically, unless I'm correct, no German soldier ever stepped foot there. But there was the Blitzkrieg and there was bombings.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, you don't need a soldier to get blown up. Japan can attest to that. No American soldier ever stepped foot in Japan, and look what happened,
But yeah, that's what I'm saying. Britain didn't face much of the brunt, and that's why I even wonder how much of that is reality and how much was propaganda.
I mean, I'd still say like it did, like obviously compared to like the devastation of Germany, where it got absolutely trampled in every conceivable way by everyone. Obviously, nowhere near compared to that. But in other ways, it absolutely did. I mean, you need to go to Birmingham or to London. You can still see the aftermath today. I mean, thousands and
Yeah.
thousands. I mean, if
There's
there's like,
World War II bombs, like
Yeah, that's one thing they've
yeah, I
found
mean,
time.
if there's certain buildings, if you look in Birmingham, like some of them are historical. They'll be next to like a kind of 60s house, and there'll be another one. Why is that? Because that house was blown up in the middle.
Really?
Yeah, there's still like a few places like that you can see. I mean, thousands and thousands, like tens and thousands. I can't know if it goes into the millions. But lots of people died in the UK. So not as much, but it's like a spectrum of like it was still bombed. It wasn't like the United States, which was completely safe and nothing really happened. Other than and that's still small scale compared to anything that Britain or France or Poland experienced.
Yeah.
And even then, France, I mean, it got conquered, but other than that, it came back in 5 years' time just fine.
That's economically speaking, but wasn't half of France under German rule?
I mean, but what I mean is, in 5 years' time, it was back to the way it was.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
very true.
Unlike, say, Poland, which kind of ceased to exist. Actually, I mean, it continued, but it was under conquest.
Mm-hmm.
The Polish government wasn't welcome back until I think 1991 or 1989.
That's why I got you on, because you know too much history.
Wow,
Yeah. The Soviet Union, of course, took Poland over, and then Germany and then gave some of it to Germany, and then made a Polish communist state, and then and so. Poland survived. It wasn't independent. It wasn't its own country.
Mm-hmm.
If Poland never tried to leave the Soviet Union, it would get conquered again, and so nothing compared to that, really. In many ways, Poland was one of the worst, if not because their country stopped existing afterwards, really.
Mm-hmm.
But there we go.
Yeah, part of why I even asked you about, not to, like, obviously, if there's anything bad way you want to speak about, you don't have to.
Of course.
But part of the reason, because I didn't know you were Jewish, and I've actually known you for longer than years, of course. But there's a lot of anti-Semitism nowadays, especially on social media. I think that's probably where I've seen it most prevalently. There's a lot of like Hitler jokes. People nowadays on social media, I know it's a lot of edgelords and dark humor people. They look at like Hitler like, oh, he was onto something, or he was a good guy, kind of thing. Or people that are pro or anti-Israel, I should say. People that are anti-Israel start to big up Hitler, like even the last thing that I just drop in is that I saw this joke that they're gonna revive Hitler for World War III. Yeah, some crazy. So there's quite a bit of anti-Semitism, especially on social media.
Yeah,
is that something like? Because you mentioned to us that you don't feel you're Jewish ethnically, but you don't feel like towards that. How do you feel towards anti-Semitism?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like culturally Jewish in some ways and ethnically, but I'd not like really. I don't entirely believe if I'd say that. But like, no, it's definitely true. I mean, you have to look at campus, and I know countless instances of anti-Semitism that's taken place at the University of Leicester. Yeah, I don't think a lot of it, mind you, is like because the problem is a lot of people conflate Israel with Jewish, and they can't see the differences between the two.
Can you not say that about some Jewish people or some politicians?
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. But like, I think it's different because Judaism is such a unique religion in the way that to be a Christian, you have to believe in God. That is about as simple as it gets. So there's more to it, of course, but you have to believe.
So other religions are just a religion, whereas Judaism.
Yeah, so it gets very tricky for a lot of people. And then there's Israel, and obviously Israel is the state that commits horrific crimes. So a lot of time people conflate being Jewish with being Israeli. Lots of people who've said to me, like, I can't believe there's an Israeli society on campus. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Talk about the Jewish society. But that's an instance of anti-Semitism, some would say. In fact, it probably is.
Would you consider that an incident of anti-Semitism?
I suppose it probably is. But obviously, I don't think they'd intend... once you correct them, then they're apologetic about it. So but that's what I mean. There's not a lot of education on the nuances of anti-Semitism. Yeah. So a lot of most people I've met who could be classed as making an anti-Semitic remark, I don't think they've done it intentionally. But also equally, there is still a lot of anti-Semitism. Obviously, the thing for me, you wouldn't. One of the reasons you didn't know I was Jewish was because I don't talk about it really. Yeah. It doesn't really come up unless someone directly asks me, or it comes up in a conversation or someone's talking about Judaism. But some of my friends I know, they wear the keffah, they wear traditional Jewish outfits. They do get abuse on the streets. They have had abuse happen to them.
Like
even
what?
I can't remember what my friend told me, my friend Jack, but like they just have people come up to them and say some kind of Jewish slur or something like that.
Like in what cities, what areas?
Like London, for example. And my friend
Really?
specifically lives in London. I
Okay.
don't know where it happened in London, but he was walking with his boyfriend. He looks like me, normal, no Jewish outfits or anything that would identify him as a Jew.
Mhm.
His boyfriend wears the whole, on his head. So they got some
do you
abuse.
mean the black outfit with the curly hair?
Yes, like the cafe, the cap at the top.
I'll be honest, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But basically what you're saying is people kind of were anti-Semitic towards him.
Yeah.
They attacked him.
Yeah.
So like a hate crime, effectively.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and I think they almost kind of go under the radar a bit because, especially what's happening in Palestine now, it's almost become a trend to hate on Jewish people and conflate it with the issue. But what we realise now as well is that like there are a lot of Israeli people who are actually against what the government's doing and everything, and especially some of the more what's it called? The indigenous, is it?
Do you mean Orthodox?
Yeah, the Orthodox. Some of them particularly are quite against the government regime.
Yeah, it's a multifaceted issue, which Israel is, and often people do present it as binaries a lot of the time when it is. There's like that. I've been to pro-Palestine marches that I've been at where people have stood up and said, all of Israel is responsible for this, and I think that's just it's wrong, isn't it? Because the government's responsible, absolutely, but are the innocent people, the children who just happened to be born in Israel because that's where they were born, responsible? Do they deserve to die? No. But then the same thing goes for the innocent Palestinians as well.
I don't know where to even go because I didn't expect this conversation to go this way, and I'm trying to be careful not to say anything that's gonna get all of us in trouble. But if we're gonna go that way, I guess one of the things that I will say that I've definitely seen and read about is currently with the conflict in Palestine, a lot of people say is why don't Egypt help? Why don't so and so help? And you could ask that, and you can have that discussion. But say if Egypt now takes 1 million Palestinians, that's a space where 1 million Palestinians used to live. That's going to be taken from them, and it's going to have settler colonies or whatever whatever euphemism you want to call it. You want to take that space, and Israel's going to take it, and now the Palestinians have less land. So I think you're absolutely right in saying that. You can't go and now blame every Israeli that they're responsible, and you definitely can't blame every Jewish person that they're responsible. But people are profiting from their suffering because they'll happily live in the same houses that they used to live in and live in the same homes they used to live in that were bombed this year or last year, but in 2 or 3 years they'll rebuild on and pretend like nothing happened kind of thing. And I did mention the anti-Semitism that I've seen on social media. I've also seen the same Islamophobia, anti-Palestinianism especially. The same kill them all, get rid of them, they're not civilized, etc. I've also seen that exact same thing. So, I think that's really bad.
Yeah, I think we're quite polarized society nowadays, especially with social media. Everyone either wants to take one side or another. No one likes to be in the middle. Everyone sort of feels that they have to have a tribe in a way.
Yeah, I mean it's a hard issue to deal with really in general. I mean, let's take people who are pro-Palestine here. I understand why it is so difficult because if you take the viewpoint that, and probably the rightful one, mind you, Israel is committing a probable genocide. That's the position of the United Nations. Then that's not a very nuanced issue. A genocide is not a nuanced issue. Trying to say, you shouldn't do this. Well, the argument is, we need to do anything we can to disrupt Israel because they're committing a genocide, one of the maybe the worst crime against humanity. You don't like to rank them, but that would probably rank in the top 2 or 3. It's a difficult issue because if you do believe Israel is committing a genocide, which they most likely are, then there's no negotiation on that. There's no, but equally, a lot of people will see that and go, well, it doesn't matter. Israel has a right to defend itself, which they do. Israel has a right, but also they do. But obviously, then you get into the nuances of, well, what does that actually mean? Israel right now would say it's defending itself. Is it defending itself? It's gone way beyond that, hasn't it?
Lebanon, Syria, they're bombing, they're waging
Exactly.
war in the Middle East. That's got nothing to do with defending itself.
Exactly.
And if any of these countries try and defend themselves, the whole world will step in to almost annihilate them.
Yeah, so
So
it's a polarizing issue, but I think it's understandable why it is so polarizing, really, and it gets into so many different debates and arguments.
And I know you have a really interesting story working at the student union about how the police were even involved in some of the students and the protests.
before we even get into what that story is, because that community in themselves, like you might see them, but they're very tight-lipped. So maybe from your perspective, what exactly are they doing? Like when they were camping outside in front of one of the university buildings, what exactly are they doing? And what
the encampments.
Yeah, like what's the
all around
purpose?
The country.
What's the purpose? What's the purpose? So the purpose of it, obviously, is that obviously there's not much anyone can do over here to stop Israel directly. So the main thing is to stop them indirectly.
Right.
And the pro-Palestinian people who've been camping out, who've been occupying buildings, believe there is a key role that can be played by the university to do things. I mean, this is probably the top three aims. First one is that the University of Leicester banks with Barclays Bank. Obviously the University of Leicester is a multi-million-pound business that is significant. They bank with Barclays Bank, which is a bank that does invest into Israel. Then they have a careers fair that invites arms dealers and weapons dealers and different types of people, groups that trade with Israel and give them weapons and stuff like that to come in as well. So you've got stuff like the university is indirectly involved in Israel, and that's their view on that. And so if they can they can convince the university not to bank with Barclays, if they can convince them don't invite these weapons dealers and promote them, that's a positive. And there's many more stuff than that. They've also been fighting for visas for Palestinian students, which they actually did get that one. The university gave, I think it was 3 or 4 or 5 visas to Palestinian students as a full scholarship, full ride.
Congratulations to them.
Yeah, so it's not just that. There's many more stuff than that. There's but those are some of the key. But you can
what would
use
stop
all
the
that.
university from giving visas to Palestinian students?
They haven't been stopped. Yeah, so they actually because the university can basically pick who it wants to. Has a pot of money each year. It can pick who it wants to give scholarships to. In this case, they can just go. I want to have 2 or 3 people from Palestine. The only thing that stops them is Palestinian students need to reply, and as long as they pass the UK visa requirements, then that's it. So I guess if the UK government said, this person's not appropriate because a security check or and some other agenda, but as long as they pass that, then that's it really. So that's what they're fighting for. Is there's an indirect link between here and Israel, and if they can disrupt that, then that's the part they can play in trying to stop Israel's genocide.
I didn't even know a lot of that, to be honest with you. I didn't even know any of that.
Yeah.
Because if you ask people that walk past and people that see them, they seem like a nuisance or like a trend with no goal, no aim, just to make some noise. So it's good to hear that they have something they're doing. They're doing it for a reason. So.
Yeah, I mean there is a big thing too. Is it's not a united front, and what I mean is a lot of the actions that happen aren't always coordinated. Sometimes there's been stuff that's gone on that the committee in PALSOC didn't even know about. That was going. There's it's a thing that anyone can get involved in really.
Yeah.
But they all have different aims, right? The encampment was one aim of. It's all different pressure points. The encampment was let's just camp out and try and annoy the university enough to talk to us and negotiate and stuff like that. And as it did have some small wins because they got the Palestinian visa issue from that. Same with the occupation of Atin Tower. Let's disrupt the university's teaching enough to the point where they feel it's not worth it. Let's just not bank with Barclays anymore.
They've actually decided that.
No, they haven't decided that. Yeah, The university. Yeah, so the big.
I don't think
they haven't
when
decided
it comes
that.
to protests and stuff like that, when you're trying to target money, I'd say you'd have to really do a lot to make somebody stop banking with somebody. So
yeah, it's a difficult. So the university has agreed to a review of Barclays and their agreement with Barclays, but from what you can probably guess, a review probably isn't. Yeah, already before I even get into anything, a review probably is not going to change anything.
Yeah.
And it's a double-edged sword, really, because I think the university it's a hassle, money could be lost, that's their position. Also, I think the university probably thinks that, if we left Barclays, they'd still complain anyway, so why bother?
Yeah.
Go on.
I was doing some event promotion in Sheffield, and Sheffield Uni, they were doing a similar thing, protesting with the students. And when you go into Instagram, you see accounts all over the country doing a similar thing. So I'm just wondering, like, have you seen it in similar
Oh yeah,
cities and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, there's encampments everywhere. I mean, there's like over 50 of them, probably, like 54. Like, there's more than I can count. Encampments are everywhere. I went on a bit of a tour of different universities in my role. I've been to about 5 or 6 different ones. I think most of them had an encampment of some sort, or had an encampment at some point, or some kind of pro-Palestinian student action. It's a key issue. It's one of the, when I first got involved in politics, one of the first issues you find out about really is the rights of Palestinian people and how that relates to everything else.
Yeah. So tell us more about how some of the students got arrested.
Yeah, sure. So so it's been a bit of a chicken and the egg situation for the last few, I suppose you'd say, months. Really, is pro-Palestinian students do something the university doesn't like. The university makes some kind of veiled threats. Maybe we'll do disciplinary action. Maybe we'll call the police. Maybe whatever. And then eventually they agree to negotiate with the university, and they might get a small concession. The university might lose something. Maybe the university gets something. But the status quo is kind of restored. The encampment wrapped up. It was a compromise because the university agreed to some stuff. They agreed to. The main stuff the university agreed to was no disciplinary action, no police investigation. But it ultimately not much really, because the Palestinian visa is probably the big one they've got. Everything else, not really. Nothing else has been achieved yet. So it's been
But to anyone, that's a success.
Yeah. Like
from the start point of no action to having achieved, as you said, 4 or 5 full rides for students. I'd take a full ride any day.
Yeah, so like there have been small successes, but the big wins they're really craving, let's not bank with Barclays, let's not invite arms dealers. Those ones have been elusive. So you've seen them as, the encampment was peaceful. People occupied a lawn that, to be honest, the university never uses. And that was fine. The university, I don't think, was concerned about the encampments in that way at all. Like, it was whatever. Then they started occupying buildings, which the university does care about, because obviously that disrupts the core business of the university. And that's the problem, because the university basically has a protest policy, which is, as long as we know about it and and it doesn't disrupt the core business of the university, we don't care. But now there's been escalation. First, they occupied Fielding Johnson. The university threatened police. Eventually, it came to a negotiated compromise, mainly because of the students' union, but telling the university police, don't call the police. That would be really silly. Then again, they occupied the engineering building on open day. Similar story again. University threatened to call the police. Eventually, came to a compromise where students left. Status quo is restored. No disciplinary action once again. And then this time, Atima Tower, except it didn't end that way. This time, the university did call the police. The students entered there at 10, I think about 10 p.m. on last Thursday, left at 11 a.m. roughly on Friday. And this time, the university...
When was this?
Last Friday.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is still ongoing?
Yeah, this is last Friday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so less than a week ago, university arrested, I think 12. I don't know how many of them were students, if they were all students or not. I don't know, but some of them definitely were. I know that. And they were arrested and sent to various places, and some of them were held overnight and stuff like that. So, yeah, I don't know too much more. But, yeah, people got arrested. And the main thing I've, in my kind of professional role as community and wellbeing and the student union as a whole, we've been helping to provide the students with basically legal counsel, free legal advice they can use if they need it, well-being support, academic support in terms of like mitigating circumstances. Being arrested can be very traumatic and also be very disruptive to your academics. So doing all we can.
One would argue if you didn't want to disrupt your academics, you shouldn't have camped in a building.
I suppose that's true, but equally,
But
that's also the exact point. If if you believe that Israel is committing a genocide, then any price is worth paying, really, to stop that.
Save some lives.
Exactly. Even if this action saved one life, that has been more than worth it, hasn't it?
Yeah. And you know what? One thing that I wanted to say based on what we've just said is, as take the United States for example, your First Amendment, freedom of speech, right to protest, right to practice your religion, etc. But if we take the protest element, a protest becomes completely useless if you have to notify people in advance so they can plan around it and almost make it sound like they're just a nuisance, but they're over there and nothing has changed. For a protest to work, it almost has to become a riot. Not a riot, say,
Has to
but
be
it has to
disruptive
be.
enough.
Yeah, it has to be disruptive.
To cause
not just be
annoyance.
disruptive. Like, it can't just be like, oh, look at those idiots over there. It has to be people can't get to work or operations can't function. Something has to really be halted. Just like those Just Stop Oil people that they disrupt TfL, they camp in front of the motorway. I do look at them and I think, yeah, you are inconveniencing regular people. You are stupid. But I understand that you believe in a cause greater than yourself. And it's a cause so great, it's not like getting your boss to give you a raise. You have to halt the government from taking certain action or make them take certain action.
Yeah.
It's almost sacrificing
We're
themselves in a way.
talking billions. We're talking thousands or hundreds of lives. We're talking departmental shifts, etc., etc. That cannot be done if you're making it convenient for the people you're protesting against. So that's something I understand, and I appreciate, at least, even if I don't necessarily agree with it or what they do. And that goes for any kind of protest. The second thing that I want to speak about is not just for us locally, but for Palestinian protests in general. Typically speaking, when you have, for example, the past few major events that we've gone through, COVID, EDL riots in the UK, George Floyd riots internationally, and Palestinian protests, and even the past, apparently 1 million people marched against the war in Iraq. If you look at all of these things, the last one we just had was EDL riots. We call it a riot because they were violent. And you can't just say just the EDL people were violent. Some ethnic people banded together and caused violence. If you look at the George Floyd protests or whatever that you had in the UK, George Floyd wasn't from Britain. You'd ask yourself why they're protesting. But if you look at them, there are pictures of police all bloodied and statues being cut down and bottles being tossed and cars being on fire. You look at that thing. You look at COVID. You look at many, many things. One thing I did notice, which was very strange to me, was that during Palestinian protests, where you got up to 500,000 people alone in central London, not in an outskirt of London, in central London, from Tower Bridge to Westminster, from all over, marching. And the media really had to search far and wide just to try and find anything that could slightly blemish them in any way, shape or form. And we're talking about 500,000 people. Now, to me, London, that's a sizable chunk of London, but that's some people's whole city. That's twice some people's whole city population.
That's
And
much bigger than Leicester.
you can get them to march from the north of the centre of London to the south of the centre of London, outside to Westminster, outside to Chelsea, Tower Bridge, and there can be almost no violence. It's completely stainless. You get Jeremy Corbyn there, you get big politicians. You're not getting the same thing that you necessarily get with, say, like what happened with George Floyd riots, or what happened with the EDL riots, or what happened during COVID, etc. Or what happened when Donald Trump didn't get to win the 2020 election and they stormed the Capitol. You don't get these same things. Now, to somebody who might see that on the news, maybe they can't appreciate that scale. But you're not from London. Are you familiar with a place called Westfield Shopping Centre?
Yeah.
So do you know where Zara is in that shopping centre?
Roughly, yeah.
Roughly. So I'm from East London, so this is like a local place to me. I walk past one day, I see Zara, and I see one of the big shutters is shut. Maybe like 2 police. I'm like, it's a bit odd, but whatever. Sometimes people bring knives to East London. I don't, maybe something like that. Or maybe there was a shoplifter, something like that. By pure coincidence, 2 days later, I'm scrolling on my phone. Or the same day, actually, I'm scrolling on my phone. I see maybe like 1,000 people in that space protesting against Zara because Zara put out a sort of campaign which mocked Palestinians who were getting killed. Or, supposedly that's what it was aligning to, rubble and sorts of things, and they sort of like mocked them in a way. And the pro-Palestinian quickly, very, very quickly, got in there, coordinated, protested. Zara quickly released a statement: "We will never do this again. We're going to cut this line. That line's being cut. We're no longer. We apologize for our mistake." That's a lie, obviously. You know, the PR team had to move quickly, but it astounded me how quickly they could get together, protest 1,000 people without shoplifting, without riots, without violence. And being from London, you see footage all the time of people in Oxford Street stealing in JD, a bunch of kids on TikTok, they ran into a store. You can see, like, when people want to riot and call it a protest, how common that is. It really shocks me how pro-Palestinian people can get together and in such big numbers without causing any violence, any destruction. So much so that the BBC had to come out and apologize for making up that the Palestinian protests were violent, that there were riots. They had to apologize, begrudgingly so, because they're so peaceful, they're so organized, and that's something that really shocks me.
Yeah.
Because you don't get to see that in the 21st century.
Yeah, no, so the collective solidarity over Palestine, not just here, but like internationally. That's what I mean. When I first got politically educated and someone on, I suppose you'd say the left, really. I am on the left. You know, the rights of Palestinians and the stuff that goes on in there was like one of the first issues you ever hear about. And it makes sense, you know, as someone left, you are more predisposed, I suppose, to care about inequality, to care about people on the bottom. And if you look at any kind of group of people alive, Palestinians have undoubtedly one of the most at the bottom. They lack any kind of state. They're actively biased, you know, second-class citizens and below in Israel. You know, the ones that are alive in Gaza essentially live in an open-air prison.
Yeah. And these are things said by the United Nations, but it's completely ignored by you-know-who.
Yeah, so, yeah. And on that other point you mentioned about disruptivity, I think I agree. You know, I understand the conundrum, which is you know, pro-Palestinian students want to be disruptive. You can't be disruptive if you're going to tell the university what you're going to do. Obviously, the students' union is always trying to find a compromise between those two, so being like, oh, maybe you can protest here, disrupt a little bit, but that's not really what the university wants. The university wants people probably in like a neat thing, because obviously they don't want their core business to be disrupted, so it's a balancing act between all of them, and obviously it depends what you think is right. The one view, the orthodox view, is pro-Palestinian students need to be as disruptive as possible, you know, disrupt exams, disrupt buildings, lectures, and that will get university to listen. The other view, which is espoused by some students I know as well, that I just thought I'd offer as a fun counterpoint, is that actually it needs to be more conciliatory towards university, get a seat at the table, get the university to actually listen to them. Because at the moment, the university's not listening to them. The university's going, you know what, in the months since the encampment, it's gotten worse. The talk of police used to be just talk. Now it's happened. Well, the university go next.
I disagree with that.
I'm not offering that as my opinion. I'm offering that as what I've heard of just like.
No. The reason I disagree with that is because often people say to change the system you have to get within the system.
That's the argument. That's the counterpoint.
They'll say, oh, you need to pick the better of two evils, etc. But I think it's such a shame when in society people convince you that in order to remove corruption, you need to facilitate and participate in corruption. That is, to me, absolute bollocks. And you see that when it comes to voting. You see that when it comes to bureaucracy in certain businesses. For example, the NHS. Rather than, and I know you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but rather than cutting out a cancer, it's like you're negotiating with the cancer. Okay, instead of growing over 5 years, grow over 10 years, give us some extra time. Let's see how we get. No, I don't agree with that, because the truth is when you get into these spaces, you understand that you being outside is similar to you being inside, because it's an exponential curve into where you need to arise. You essentially have to, once you get to the top of any business, they'll still say, oh, well, we need to get the other businesses to work with you. Once you get a pro-Palestinian MP in there, well, the minute they get there, and this has been shown, the minute you get a pro-Palestinian MP into Parliament, they go back on their word, and the Leicester one did this. What
a shock at.
Yeah, and that's why it wasn't voted back in, because they go back on their word, or they'll say, well, it can't just be me. We still need 20 other people. You get 20 other people. Well, we can't just be the 20 other people. We need to get the Prime Minister. Okay, even the Prime Minister is pro-Palestinian now. Or well, the businesses that this country needs to work with in the.
I think both are true. I think there's arguments for both. Obviously, I know which side I fall on. But really, I think their arguments are for both. I mean, if you look at history, sometimes the big change isn't always better. You know, in 20th century was a lot of big changes. How many of them were for the best? Not a lot of them. But you know what did survive?
What?
Democracy. That led to a lot of big changes in its own way. And in exchange for big explosive changes that don't always go well, the Western world had democracy, which is lots of small, medium-sized changes which eventually add up to something big. So, like, you can make changes from within. I mean, the NHS used that as an example. That's one example. Used to be a time it was inconceivable that the state could offer any healthcare to anybody. And yet over the course of like the 19th, 20th century, that was slowly built up to where the state took more and more, very slowly, responsibilities until it eventually took a big responsibility and became the main healthcare provider for everybody. So you kind of cheat. So I think both arguments are valid. I know which one I believe more. But like, I think it's worth saying you can change things from within, because look at society, look how many things in democratic societies have changed from within. I mean, just let's take voting. You know, it used to be, it was entirely property based, entirely wealthy, very small minority. In fact, we used to no voting at all. Then it was a little bit, then a little bit more, a little bit more. Now everyone's enfranchised, and there's even more to come. You know, in Scotland they voted, I think it's votes at 16. We don't have that in England at the moment for general elections, but we could do. So like, changes can happen both by being disruptive, and obviously there's clear examples of being disruptive. You know, apartheid, and so death of apartheid in South Africa being the classic one everyone always uses because it's true. That only really broke apart because people were disruptive internationally and managed to do their part. So both are valid. It depends on the situation, but I know which one I believe more. If that makes sense. I just don't. I don't think there is value. Is what I'm saying is to the argument of need to go from within. You might get slower changes, but you can still make changes from within that might not otherwise be accomplished, because sometimes that is the only way. And with something like the university, to take an example, they do hold all the cards.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, and definitely when you think about creating change from within rather than making the loud voice, if you think of Malcolm X, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and a lot of the recent revolutionaries in the 20th century, yes, they were peaceful to an extent, but they were also highly disruptive as well. And that goes back to the previous point you were saying about being disruptive. I think peace, peace
Mandela
only
was
works.
called a terrorist.
He was.
Yeah, peace only works when you already have a diplomatic relationship with the people.
Yeah, and I think that's true.
But if you're already in the oppressed category, I think trying to build that diplomatic relationship is kind of futile.
No, I think that's true. You know, that's like one of the examples where so many of my Irish families, you know, over there used to sympathise with the IRA, because at least until the Good Friday Agreement, there was little argument that, you know, there was a diplomatic way out of the crisis. If you wanted an independent Ireland, it was difficult to get there. The Good Friday Agreement now offers a peaceful pathway for Irish reunification to be achieved if the Irish people want it. Before then, difficult to conceive. You could see why people would and go, you know what, I've tried being... You know, there was a book I read a while ago of a woman, I can't remember her name, but she was originally in the Irish peace camp. She wanted Irish reunification, but wanted it peacefully. So she went out on a big peace march that was going across Northern Ireland. Halfway through, they got ambushed by a group of Protestants, and they were torn apart. One of her friends was killed in this. And afterwards, she said, you know what, the next day I joined the IRA. I went, you know what, I've given peace a chance. It's now time for something else. You know, and you can decide, and I can understand why somebody would think that. You know, whether that was true or whether that's the best way is a whole other question. But I understand why people could think that, because there was a lack of easy, peaceful. So if you were being peaceful, you were putting yourself at just as much as risk as you were joining the IRA. Because, you know what, you tried being peaceful and you got ambushed in a public place and somebody was killed. It's an interesting conundrum. I don't think there is a right or wrong answer, because there's scenarios for both, quite frankly, in history, of people being peaceful and making a big change, and people being violent and being disruptive and making a big change.
Yeah,
and often I think it's probably a bit of both that achieves it in the end. You know, you need people who are being disruptive. You mean, you mentioned like MLK, civil rights, as much as, you know, the peaceful marches played a role, the violence did too. But both achieved it. You know, both raised awareness in different ways. You know, a lot of time Martin Luther King would go on peace marches, he'd be protected by more people who were willing to be violent and ward other people off who might try and disrupt those things. And in the end, they both achieved in passing, but ultimately it was only achieved through peaceful means. But through Congress, but maybe that wouldn't have happened if
not
people weren't being disruptive in the first place. Would Congress have cared? It's a good question. But I think both complement each other ideally, probably is like the correct answer in terms of you have to say you need both sometimes to really get there. People on the inside who can actually make the change, and then people on the outside to try and raise awareness and get enough people interested to get people on the inside to change things or persuade the people on the inside actually this is an issue worth taking seriously.
Actually, to be fair, even thinking about change, we've had a change in this country with the party politics.
It's a good segue.
Yeah, with the party politics. So for the first time in a long time, and one of the few times in this country's history, the Labour Party are now back in power.
After 15 years?
I think 14, yeah.
The last one was Tony Blair.
Gordon Brown.
Gordon Brown was before Tony Blair.
He's after Blair. Blair was 97 to 2007. Brown was 2007 to 2010.
Really? So what did he?
Well, Blair resigned. Not kind of. He was forced out, but he was already thinking of resigning, because he'd done 10 years, and you know what? That's enough time to be prime minister. He'd won 3 times. He was like, I don't know if I can win a 4th time.
Fair enough.
So hand off to someone else.
Okay, so since Brown, but even historically speaking, in this country, it's not favourable to the Labour Party.
It's not.
It's not favourable to the Labour Party at all. But we do have our own pseudo two-party system. But one thing I wanted to ask you is, based on your somewhat of an academic background, even though you didn't study politics.
Did study politics.
Wasn't it history?
History and politics were year abroad.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Okay. With your historical and political understanding.
You know, but I think both complement each other in different ways.
Yeah.
Very similar.
Why do you think British people voted for the Labour Party? And is there any other reason outside of just not to have the Conservatives in?
I mean, the first one is obvious. Is the obvious, boring answer. Is, you know, there is in the world at the moment. There is an anti-incumbency thing that is just going on. If you look at like a academic chart or a graph, for the first time in I think 100 years, like in every single Western country, every single Western democracy, the incumbent government has fallen and not survived. You know, Rishi Sunak in the UK. You've got Germany at the moment, the SDP on the verge of defeat. The SDP coalition. Obviously, America, we've just seen with Donald Trump what happened over there. There is Canada looks to fall to the Conservatives from the Liberal Democratic Party very soon.
Trudeau's not working.
No government. I mean, look at France as well. Obviously, Macron isn't up for election again, but he was in the parliamentary elections and his party lost. They lost their ruling coalition. There was a massive anti-incumbency rise that is just genuinely people are blaming whoever is in charge, whether rightfully or wrongfully. And letting other people in their place. It's hard for an incumbent to survive. So I think that is first the big thing. There's a massive in the Western world, a massive anti-establishment, massive anti-incumbency thing going around that just forced the Conservatives out. You know, if Labour was in that position, they probably would have met a similar fate because Biden got elected over Trump, and then he still lost. And Democratic Party still lost anyway. Years later.
No one really likes the so-called status quo.
Yeah, so people just want change, even if they don't. Obviously, even if they don't like. Yeah, people want change, even if they don't really know what that change is going to be, or care, or think too deeply about it.
One can't say.
But I mean, there is a but. There is a but.
Somebody could say, "Oh, Liverpool lost the Champions League, but everyone was losing the Premier League."
Yeah, no, I've got a but of that as well, which I think there is more to say, because I think that's one argument, but there's also like 2 more, I'd say. Firstly, the Conservatives are just by the end flogging and incompetent. You know, I mean, they had like 4 prime ministers in 5 years. They had David Cameron, then we switched to Theresa May, then Boris Johnson, then Liz Truss, then Rishi Sunak. Liz Truss was a disaster by all accounts. She crashed the economy. Kwasi Kwarteng. Yeah, let's not talk about that guy.
And then that video he got caught talking about, I was the foreign secretary or wherever he was. And he was only there for like 2 days and he was already applying for a new job.
Yeah, so like, obviously, I don't know if the Conservatives would have survived if they did a good job. Probably not, but they might have done a lot better had they not like been if you look at the polling at least, the Conservatives and Labour were neck and neck or slightly above. As soon as Liz Truss came into power, they were never able to get back up to that point ever. So
even just to say then, Rishi Sunak is not necessarily to blame, or he could not have done anything to improve the situation.
Well, I mean, I think he could have. You know, like I think Rishi Sunak is still to blame. He made a lot of mistakes, a lot of unpopular ideas. he's not the most.
Don't tell me eat out to help out, which was to help out the economy, is the reason he failed.
No, I don't think that's the reason he failed. I think the Eat Out to Help Out on that note was a bit silly, the way it was timed, where they had a COVID lockdown, then they Eat Out to Help Out, and then it caused more people to get infected again, and leading to that, really, which was a bit silly. We got a lack of air in here. A little bit. It's hot, isn't it?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Not long enough.
45 minutes. But yeah, like, Rich considers made a lot of mistakes in their choice of leaders. And then finally, the thing I'd say too is that Kier Starmer deserves more credit than he gets for the victory. Because, well, the thing is that him and Jeremy Corbyn got the same amount of votes. So the question is, why did Corbyn win, or Corbyn lose, and why did Starmer win?
Well, then you would say that's because people wanted the Conservative Party out that badly.
If you look at our electoral system in politics, we have a system called first past the post.
Yeah.
And what that means is elections are decided by a small number of marginal constituencies across
number of MPs and
the
majority of MPs in the party.
Rather than the vast majority of the country having like a real.
And that's why people said what's that British party, the
Reform?
The racist one. Yeah, they got so many votes, but they only got 4 MPs.
Yeah. So my point being, Kier Starmer courted the types of voters who were in those swing seats. Because usually with Jeremy Corbyn, you can get the same number of votes, but the problem with Corbyn is his votes were all in safe Labour seats. Corbyn achieved record results in Leicester, record results in London, record results in Manchester. But what does it matter if they're just, you had MPs like John McDonnell having 50,000 vote majorities. Mm-hmm. Now their majorities are much less, but it doesn't matter because Starmer was building up small majorities in Conservative-held seats and appealing to Tory switchers who attempted to vote Labour, but need a reason to switch. So, that's what I mean. I think he deserves more credit because you can easily imagine a scenario where, okay, the Conservatives might have lost the election, but Labour gets a minority government. They'd have no majority. They have to rely on other parties for power. Instead, we've got a Labour government with a massive 100-plus majority, able to do whatever it wants. So that's a big difference from a hung parliament where Labour might have Kier Starmer as Prime Minister, but that might be the only thing they have. They don't have any party to actually make any difference in Parliament. They have to negotiate, they have to haggle. Yeah. Same thing happened in the election.
But can you really say that isn't because people wanted the Conservative Party so badly that... Can you really say that's what Sir Kier Starmer did?
Yeah, and also that, at the end of the day, the thing is, governments have to lose elections first, and people have to look at... there was an interesting poll done that puts out more than anything else is... There was a point that said, how would you feel if the Conservatives won an election again? I think 80% of people were would feel horrible about it. How many people would feel bad if Labour won? It's 20%. Kier Starmer made the Labour Party look safe. A lot of people were turned off by Jeremy Corbyn, rightfully or wrongfully, by Jeremy Corbyn. Media perceptions, Corbyn's own mistakes, whatever it is. Starmer made Labour Party appeal to my neighbour, my mum's house, is a Tory, and you know what? She voted Labour for the first time ever, not even under Blair.
Because he was convincing her.
Yeah, and and my mum lives in a marginal constituency that needed the Labour voters to switch, otherwise they couldn't win. So
I wanted to ask you. I saw this Rishi Sunak edit the other day.
It's not the Minecraft edits either.
No, it's this one. If you take a look at that, you told me that.
Is it tax rises?
Yeah.
I want to know who made this because you've actually made Rishi Sunak look cool. I don't know that was possible.
That's what the comment said.
I need to see this.
Turns out editing can fix anything. Who
knows?
Of course, Rishi Sunak doesn't answer the question of all the bad things he did in that.
But is he right about that? Because with this new tax thing that he brought in, has it made things better or worse? But I haven't looked into it. Okay, I won't pretend. I think it's mainly aimed at businesses.
Well, I was going to say...
or somewhat wealthy people. And not necessarily so much people who are working. But don't those people bring more to the economy than average Joe who works a 9 to 5? Don't the businesses need to continue to grow and prosper for the economy to do well?
Well, I suppose you could say that, but you could also say our economies... I mean, here's the thing. The argument... Because I have a lot of people come back, and the big argument against all this is, national insurance is going to lead to a stagnated economy, lack of pay rises for people, all that stuff. But here's the thing. The economy's crap anyway. we have an economy that is not growing. GDP growth has never recovered from the financial crisis. It's way below. It's terrible. We're terrible at productivity. Wages have stagnated for about 15, 16, 17 years now. You know what? Labour is offering an alternative where they're investing more into public services to try and do that instead. Instead of tax cuts, it's taxes up. But let's try and fix schools, hospitals, fix the foundations of the economy. I think they deserve a fair shot to try something different, because the last 14 years have been tax cuts, low taxes, and you know what? Clearly that hasn't worked.
It's not a country that's known for low taxes.
Well, it's low taxes compared to Europe in a lot of cases. If you look at Europe, our taxes are very low. We have one of the lowest tax rates in Europe by comparison. The problem being, of course, that we then have these problems where unlike Europe, our public services don't get funded enough, and then you run into the problem of having to raise taxes, and it creates problems. But in comparison to Europe, we definitely do.
Fair enough. I guess, and I didn't even vote, and I'm old enough to vote. I didn't even vote, so I can't really compare.
Oh no, you should have voted.
I think it was something to do with, sorry, I live in London, so I would have had to sort things beforehand that I wasn't willing to sort. But I guess one thing I've always thought, and I've recently realised about politics, is for a politician, Prime Minister, President, whatever, to make a big change, it requires a lot of effort that they can't necessarily even do in one term or 2 terms, or they might not be able to do within their term.
Yeah, well, that's the taxes thing again. To these tax rises to pay off, we're going to have to wait probably 2 terms to find out.
Exactly. So it's going to take a while. If they do make positive change, it's going to take a while for those changes to be impacted. They're going to be vilified and hated all the while. Then the next second or third politician will come in, and during their term, when the good changes of the previous politician have started to take effect, they'll start to say, oh, this is my doing, etc., etc. So can people really know whether or not Rishi Sunak's changes have made any improvement, or whether Sir Kier Starmer's changes will make any improvement?
Don't really often think about the previous politician who just can't put their policies.
Well, yeah, the question is, firstly, will people consider it? Probably not. They might do. If it's Labour directly going into Labour, then yes. But often if it does a change in government, people usually expect kind of ground zero. The government can, But yeah, I think people can tell, because at the end of the day, I believe if Labour is successful, well, then we'll know in 5 years' time if waiting lists have gone down. If people feel like access to healthcare is easier, then they'll have succeeded. But if people feel like things are exactly the same as they were, then they will have failed. And that's a 2-pronged process. You've actually got to make the practical change, but maybe the most important one, which is the one probably Biden failed to do, and the one the Blair government also probably failed to do, make people feel it. Because there was a big difference where one of the interesting things I ever read was a book on public polling of how people perceive things. So in the Blair government, for all the massive faults and problems, corruption, blah, 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 that happened in there, one of the things they did, NHS waiting times, by any objective metric, were the lowest in history by the end. The lowest. But did people feel that? A little bit. But a lot of people would say, well, you know what, I think my local NHS is really good. But I don't believe that's the case everywhere else. It's got to be terrible. I'm just really lucky. You've got to make people feel it. Because if people don't feel it, you can have look at the United States. They have the best economy in the world. Biden led by any objective metric a really good economic recovery.
That was him, because Trump was saying, well, we've had a V-shaped
Yes,
recovery.
exactly. But yeah, Biden led by any objective metric a good economic recovery, better than the rest of the world. But people didn't feel that recovery. And that's a difference.
The war in Ukraine and the shift in oil supply to Europe and somehow led to some sort of inflation or something like that. That's my extent of economic understanding. But internationally, COVID or not, gas prices went up for everyone, bills went up for everyone. And people felt as though during Trump, if it was Trump in power, there would have been no war and there would have been no inflation. And I suppose that's a sort of segue into me asking you why you think Trump won this last election.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to offer first hopefully unique perspective, because obviously I used to live in the US and I'm going back to live there permanently in the next year. What do I think Trump? Well, I'm going to skip the obvious stuff, like everyone's talked about inflation to death, anti-incumbency, blah, blah, blah. I think the big reason is because Trump didn't win by it wasn't a blowout election. He won by not tight margins, but not comfortable ones either.
Really? Are we going to start dissing his win because it's Trump?
Oh no, I don't know, because Trump has won convincingly. He got 1 million more votes than Harris. But you know what I mean is Biden won by 7 million more votes than Trump.
Okay,
That's what I mean. In comparison to Biden, which was not, and Biden still wasn't a blowout. he might have got 7 million votes, but the Senate and Congress results didn't reflect that. 1 million votes. It's not.
Well, for Trump, it did. That's what they're saying in the media. They kept banging on about Trump now has everything, so he can pass any law he wants without fighting anyone or groveling or negotiating. He has whatever, both the House and the Senate's the Congress.
Which is also not true, but
is not true.
Well, he's got a majority in Congress, the House, by about 1, and think how disunited American politics is.
Yeah.
A majority of 1 is basically a majority of 0, really. The amount of, Republicans are crazily disorganized. They got rid of their own Speaker of the House at the last House. About the last Republican.
Didn't they also lose the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi?
They did, but then obviously they won Congress enough seats to get a Republican Speaker, but they ousted their own Republican Speaker, and then the Republican House was the most unproductive House in history, the last election. So, but anyway, my point being that I think a lot of people have forgotten what Trump was actually like. Trump is a lot better when he's the opposition, because when he's doing, he's very good at throwing stones. But he's not very good at defending himself because Trump doesn't have the solutions. He's very good at channeling that anger, but when he's the thing, he's the government, it's very difficult. So I think a lot of people just honestly, it's been 4 years since Trump. People have forgotten, firstly, what the government was actually like. And secondly, the Democrats' main things that they're talking about, democracy, abortion, for a lot of people, they can't afford to eat. That, don't matter. So a lot of people remember in Trump's time, the economy was better. So, is what Kamala Harris saying, vote for me to save democracy. Well, great, democracy is great, but I can't eat. I think that's a massive thing.
I've got
fair enough, but even I just want to quickly provide my 2 cents.
Go for it.
I think the reason people voted for Trump, even the first time and now, is a similar thing. I think you mentioned anti-incumbency, but what people don't realize is that it's not because they hated the previous guy. The people that voted for Trump, so many of them voted for Obama, so many of them voted for Biden, so many of them thinking there would be change. But they saw the same guy, just a different color, just a different gender, just a different shade, just from a different city, but the same guy come and do the same thing, made the same empty promises, and now he's in the history books. Another career politician. Trump was a complete outsider, who, if you look back in the day...
No one would have bet.
If you look back in the day, the United States used to love him. They used to, when you running for president, they used to love him on The Apprentice. They used to have open up all his towers. He might not have been perfect, but his public perception, his image was actually good. People used to like him. But the minute he starts to look like he's winning, all this starts to come out. Because he's an outsider, he's not a career politician, he's not connected to so-and-so and so-and-so. So I think that's probably why they voted for him. They wanted somebody who seemed genuine, even if he seemed like... And I'll tell you, he's not got the right stature, he's not got the right... His mannerisms, his behavior, the way he talks, the way he conducts himself. It's not professional, it's not appropriate, it's not mature. But they think, wow, he's genuine, he stopped putting on an act, he's just saying how he feels. He said, Hillary Clinton said something like, oh, you can't run the prison system or something, or you can't, you're a bully. Well, yeah, that's because if I was in charge, you'd be in prison. Because of all the things that you did, that you tried to cover up, like any typical politician.
So yeah, I think that's true until 2016. I think that's definitely true.
I think that's largely
but
true.
I don't think that's true now, because Trump is no longer an outsider. Trump is the Republican Party. He controls every single lever of power in it. Trump has been in politics for over a decade now. That is not an outsider anymore.
I wouldn't say that.
Trump, he has been in 2016 to now.
He was president for 4 years, but he's not been like...
It's been 8 years, almost 10 years, and he had the highest position of authority, and he had the whole national... the thing is, Trump...
And while he had the highest position of authority, they could not stop but do anything to try and get rid of him. The minute he got in there, impeach, look for everything, Russia conspiracy. What they're saying, he went to Putin and there were 10 prostitutes pissing on him. Everything they could do to try and get rid of him, arresting him during an election, which...
He wasn't arrested in an election.
During an election, yeah.
It was after... He wasn't arrested at all.
Or just not during an election, or during his campaign.
Yeah.
During the Mar-a-Lago and
he was arrested.
for things, when I looked into it, it was for something to do with how he stored documents or why he even had the documents. You just think he's a former president. He can get whatever document he likes. If he stores it properly is one thing, but it's like, it seemed to people as though no matter what, They just wanted to get rid of him from the moment that he got in.
Even the assassination attempts.
And now that he's gone, and the assassination attempt, I think people looked at that and they said, they're trying to get rid of the person that the people want, not the person that the politicians.
I mean,
put in
maybe
front of our face.
some people, but I still
that's what I
think the anti-incumbency thing is the bit, because at the end of the day, if you're really wanting a change, Trump's not a change. You've seen what he's like, and in fact, most American voters last time got rid of him. So do you really think getting the same guy in charge who 4 years ago you decided, you know what, this guy is not great, we're going to get rid of him, and Biden won his election by the biggest majority of popular vote in the U.S. history.
Really?
Yeah, he won 71 million.
No, you're wrong. That's absolutely wrong. No.
The highest majority.
Al Gore and Bush was the highest majority, no?
No, I'm talking about as an individual. Biden won 71 million. No presidential candidate has won with 71 million votes before.
Trump got similar number, but not far off.
No, Trump's on like 65
That
maybe.
was the highest record
Trump-
voting because of it was after COVID, because of the BLM riots.
But
That society was so galvanized.
my
that-
point being that like people were so like Biden won and now they're changing someone else who's the same guy. Trump's not a clean break is my point. And like so I think like
I understand.
because if you were really wanting a clean break, Trump shouldn't have won the primaries. They should have picked someone else who was a clean break. Vivek Ram's away, someone like that. That guy's a clean break, very different. Ron DeSantis, someone else different.
Not in the sense that
Yeah.
they're still career politicians. They're just not trusted because they're a part of the system. Whereas Trump was just a business guy.
But I do think that is a part. I do acknowledge that. Like, I think that is a part of his appeal. I think it's less now, but also Trump has a different appeal too now, which is he can act presidential. Trump is more authoritative now than any years before, so it brings different strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
When he goes around, people address him as Mr. President. Trump can argue, if you elect me, I can get things done because I've already been there. It brings different strengths having been the president before, and especially when as someone who's lived in the US, I've seen in the US there is a greater appreciation than there is here, or any other democracy I've been to, of authority, of when I was campaigning in student elections in the US, and I was campaigning against an incumbent for the student union. The current president was terrible. I campaigned against him with one of my friends who was standing for president. A lot of people would tell me, well, we can't vote her out because you know what? She's the current president. I'm sure she has a lot of experience. We wouldn't want to get rid of her, would we? And I think that's also a lot of an underrated point is Donald Trump has been the president. Kamala Harris is just the vice president, and that is a big difference. Yeah,
But, okay, I think I'll have to contest that. And this is where people's trust in the government comes into play. Biden was running for president until his obvious health issues started to creep in that he could no longer deny.
Yep.
It's like they put Kamala Harris there. She didn't run through the primaries.
Yeah,
Nobody wanted her there. They just put her in our face. Would it be fair to have somebody like that be president? Because she wasn't.
I think it's a valid argument. Maybe there should have been a primary. There probably should have been in retrospect. I don't think it would have changed anything, Mike. I think whoever the Democrats picked would have had a hard time. But could the Democrats have done better than Kamala Harris? Maybe. Obviously, we'll never know now. That's a completely what-if scenario. But they could have done better. At the very least, they would have had more legitimacy.
What I'd further argue is that people compared the campaigns. Is that I saw something? It was like one celebrity twerking. I can't remember her name. Megan Thee Stallion. They brought her out on stage while Trump's talking about policies and we're going to remove this and we're going to do this. And they got Kamala Harris as like a just to like, and it's often they do with black people in America. Like they don't campaign to them, they just expect the vote from them. So they got her some famous rapper to start twerking on stage, and it's like, this is who you want us to vote for. Why don't I vote for Trump?
The thing is, the US, I think the last election is it is a vibes-based election. Same with Trump doing the McDonald's thing. The US is, the election was vibes because at the end of the day, I'm like, when the objective metric.
They call it popularity contest.
Yeah, it is a popularity contest, especially this election. Let me think. Like Biden had, by all successful metrics, a good economic recovery. Lots of because a lot of people have been coming out the woodworks now and saying, "Oh, Biden lost. Democrats lost because they didn't do enough. They didn't deliver enough. They didn't deliver as much as they could have done if they worked together." But by an objective metric,
I want to close that door.
Yeah, cool. By an objective metric, Biden did deliver a lot of things. He saved union pensions. He brought in protecting gay marriage. That's the economic recovery, the CHIPS Act. He revived domestic manufacturing in the United States through that. So Biden delivered a lot for working class people, but the difference is those people still didn't feel that they'd been delivered upon.
The perception.
Yeah, the
aspect of
perception
things.
wasn't there that even though Biden, because I think Biden was the first president of the United States in maybe ever, if not 100 years, to ever go on a picket line. Biden spoke on a
What do you mean a picket line?
like a striking workers line.
Oh, okay.
So when you go out and strike, you usually stand outside the building and picket with signs and
Yeah.
tell people not to go to work. Biden went on a picket line as a sitting president and gave a speech, a pro-union speech.
Wow.
But you know what? If you look at the polls, there was the Teams Masters, one of the biggest unions in the US, polled their members. 60% were going to vote for Donald Trump. Even though Donald Trump, by an objective metric, I think you can probably guess, doesn't like unions, doesn't like collective organising, probably against them. In fact, he is. By a comparison, Biden there was like a whole huge thing with like union pensions. Biden bailed out union pensions. He gave a speech on a picket line. Clearly the more working class candidate for like unions, but they didn't vote for him. Or vote for the Democrats, or weren't going to vote for him to begin with. So if he stood. And I think that's just it's an interesting thing where you can deliver, but if people don't perceive it or vibes it or have other issues, cultural issues, that's another reason to vote for Trump that's not economic.
Yeah.
Then, yeah, it just shows how multifaceted things can be, and shows that sometimes doing a good job isn't enough. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
about other factors.
Yeah. That's very true. I think that's very true. I suppose then I've got to ask you.
Okay.
Because I wanted to ask about the war in Ukraine and different things like that. Don't you think Trump and Biden don't you think they would have had different positions or different outcomes into whether or not we'd have those things going on?
I don't think Trump would have prevented Ukraine because I think it's pretty clear Russia wanted to do that anyway.
But didn't that start happening the moment, not to say Biden's responsible, and I don't understand this concept of blaming a politician for all the problems in the world, like they pushed some domino down to cause it. But I think I saw it was the moment Trump got in power, Putin was saying, we're ready to negotiate for peace. Hamas was saying, oh, we're ready to negotiate. Like the moment, and he's meeting up with China, the moment these things happen, that he comes into power, it's almost like we feel like it's going to be more, we feel like it's going to be better.
I don't think that. I think it's like perception of, because if you look at like the actual issues, it's like Russia was still preparing for war when there's lots of close calls with Russia. You look at like Israel. The only thing I remember Trump ever actually doing on Israel of note was he came up with an Israeli peace plan, but only the Israeli government had oversight over that. So it was basically a Palestinian surrender, basically.
Yeah, what about North Korea actually?
I think that's a fair argument. The only thing is, there's a reason why there wasn't a third time, because the North Koreans detected that Trump was doing it for PR reasons, and it wasn't genuine.
What wasn't genuine?
That was their opinion, and because originally there was supposed to be a third summit with Kim Jong Un.
Okay.
The North Koreans pulled out, arguing that they didn't think Trump's attempt was genuine, which may well be true. Was Trump doing it just for PR reasons, or was he actually trying to sort something out? And also the other question is there a diplomatic situation that you can resolve in North Korea? Because really there isn't. If the Kim dynasty stays in power, everyone is worse off. They need to be gotten rid of, probably. Obviously, we don't know how that's going to happen in any kind of good sense.
Absolutely violent.
So you believe in and I'm going to purposefully misinterpret what you said. You believe in Western powers interfering in other countries,
not in that way,
overthrowing rightful leaders.
No, not in the kind of way you're saying. But like my point being, like the Kim dynasty needs to go. I don't know if making peace with them is the best, solution to that, because the Kim dynasty staying in power is bad. That is bad for everyone. North Korea is like the worst living standards.
They're physically shorter than South Koreans.
Yeah, like that's not great. I don't support Western imperialism in any kind of way, but you know what I mean. It's like, is cozying up to a dictator a good idea too? Probably not. We don't want to be cozy with dictators, do we?
So how do you feel when he said, Kim Jong-un said, oh, if you guys don't fix up, I've got this button here that I can press. And then Trump said, yeah, I've got a same button as well, but mine's just bigger. Do you think that, does he not like sort of get along with these people in a way that he helps bring world peace? Or do you think that do you think Trump promotes world peace or prevents it?
No, I don't think he does, because he's firstly, he's unpredictable, and the world requires rules-based, or things need to be a certain type of predictability, because otherwise things, for example, they may have been good for the dictators who like Trump, but for like Trump, America's allies in Asia or in Europe, Trump was an entirely unpredictable person who essentially could not be relied upon for anything. You didn't know what Trump was going to do. And that's not great if you're an ally, because you just don't trust the US. You can't rely on them for anything. So that's not good either.
Yeah.
Oh, go on.
Going back to what we were saying about like Kamala Harris and stuff like that. You remember some of the celebrities out of nowhere suddenly started campaigning for her. So I think it was like
Loads of them, hundreds.
Beyonce and Usher.
Taylor Swift.
Yeah, that's the big one.
So many out of nowhere just in a couple of weeks before. Do you think that's slightly suspicious?
I mean, what do you count as suspicious, I suppose? Like, do a lot of celebrities support the Democrats? Yeah, I suppose they do. Why do they?
It's more problem was socially acceptable. On paper, things.
I mean, I suppose, like,
sound.
do celebrity endorsements matter? Is like, but like, do people have the right to endorse a candidate? Yeah, I have the right to endorse a candidate, as do you guys.
Yeah, the only reason why I mentioned the word suspicious is because it all happened just as when Diddy was brought into custody and everything, and all of those people.
I think it's coincidental. You know, that's a lot of the thing. Like, sometimes there's like a thing. It's like this was the argument for like faith back in the day of like, if you know something, if you pray for something, and let's say you got a sick child and you pray and it doesn't work, the argument would be back in the village, oh, you didn't pray hard enough, you weren't faithful enough. But if it did work, it's a miracle. This shows the power of faith. A lot of things can be coincidental. If you look too much into them, anything can be a conspiracy theory. So like, lots of celebrities endorsed Kamala Harris around the time Diddy was elected, but also there was an election coming up right there and then. You know, anything that can look like a conspiracy theory if you try and make it into one, basically, and make it like successful.
Yeah, but then if you even look at like the origin of conspiracy theories and like how they were sort of brought around, I think the whole idea of calling the ideas that question the mainstream narrative conspiracies was to, I guess, demonize the average population from questioning.
Yeah, we should always be skeptical. I think every authority needs to be challenged in some way, even if you support them, because if you don't, you're opening yourselves to a loss of power, to them doing things that they shouldn't do, even if it's your own side.
Fair enough.
Absolutely.
Did you end up voting in the last election?
I did vote.
Are we allowed to know who? Or?
I'm happy to say, because I lived in a marginal Tory Labour constituency of Worcester. That's where I'm registered to vote anyway. So I voted Labour because I wanted the Tories gone.
Who won?
Yeah,
Labour won.
Okay, what was the
successful.
what was the split?
I think the Labour vote stayed the same as the Conservative votes that dropped down, and Reform kind of split the vote.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, and the Reform
did split a lot of the Conservatives.
Yeah. Reform is so interesting because we've never experienced anything like it in British politics.
I think what I will say is that, and I've never said, oh, I like Trump, or I like this person, or I like that person, or whatever. But I will have to agree, the Conservative Party's strategy to the end was to try and rile up this anti-immigration, all this smoke and mirrors to get some fringe voters. It was just unfortunate their strategy didn't work because somebody was already doing that better than them, and that took votes away from them. I think, other than the anti-income business, or whatever you want to pronounce it, I think they were just very incompetent because of one fuck up after another fuck up.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. In like an election, like in some ways, there's like the argument, and I think this is mostly true, is even if you ran the best election campaign in the world, if you got to the point where no one's listening to you, it doesn't matter. So Rishi Sunak could, I think, in the election, come up with the best policies designed by humanity, like the most amazing policies that would solve every problem. But people wouldn't believe it because you've had 14 years of broken promises by the Conservatives. Rishi Sunak saying, don't worry, guys, one more time, we're going to fix this issue. You know, let's take immigration. Just take one example. David Cameron in 2006 said the Conservatives were cutting immigration down to hundreds of thousands. Didn't happen. And the next person, gets Rishi Sunak. He's still promising we're going to be really tough on immigration. We're going to do X, Y, Z. People don't believe them anymore. And the same goes to every issue. Same with healthcare. David Cameron said we're going to have a great NHS. Didn't happen. NHS went down. Rishi Sunak saying we're going to sort the NHS out under my government. Does anybody really believe him? Absolutely not.
Okay, I want to ask you this because you brought up NHS. I know people that obviously not myself in it because I'm not in that world myself. But I have friends who study medicine, and when they study medicine, they tell me they spend a lot of time with doctors, and doctors are very convinced that it's not a matter of if, but just a matter of when, that the NHS will go private. And one of the things they told me is that as a medical student, they have a lot of insight into what people working in the NHS have to say about the NHS and why things are going wrong. Now, you and me, who are just regular Joe Blue, who aren't doctors or anything, or aren't nurses or whatever, we don't have the insight. We look at the wait times and we think, oh, it's the Tory government, the austerity, the this, that, and the other. Some of my friends have told me that a lot of the problem is poor structure, like intrinsically within the NHS. It's not a matter of Rishi Sunak or Boris Johnson or whosoever.
Just
It's a
throwing
matter
money
of
into it.
that, yeah, that they've told me that the NHS, and this is something I've wondered myself, you see in the news about the British army, Britain's waging war with China, this country, that country, but their military is severely underfunded and understaffed. Britain doesn't contribute to the world in terms of manufacturing, in terms of any other industry, chip industry, no other industry, no major output to the world. But the most heavily funded department, other than welfare, so DWP, is the Department of Healthcare. Yeah, the NHS is still acting like they're being starved. So, like, you're somebody who might have political understanding. What do you think?
I mean, here's the thing, like, everything is relative. So, like, does the NHS take a lot of resources? Yes. But has it been starved of funding by in comparison to what it would have gotten had it not had, like, cuts not happened? Of course. You know, you look at, like, wages, for example, NHS nurse wages, they follow a pattern. So I'm going to go back to the Blair government. That's the last example. Wages roughly went up. Conservatives came in, they froze pay increases. Pay has stayed the same. Now we're like, wow, why will our nurses go? Why do we have like no nurses in the NHS anymore? That's one of the reasons the NHS is failing, because people don't want to work for it anymore. It doesn't pay very well. Staff conditions aren't very good. Mass staff shortages. You can earn 3 times the amount going to Australia or America or going private. Why stay in the NHS? You know, it's like one. So I agree. Like, it's not just like, oh, just throw money at it. You need to put the money in the right places to deliver that. You know, trying to incentivize staff to stay on, but like it is possible. You know, as I go back to the Blair government again, by any objective metric, the NHS was better under them. It came with a lot of compromises. You know, PFI, private finance agreements.
Okay.
So it's basically, it was the Blair government's way of getting around public spending. They didn't want to raise taxes, so they got private companies to agree to give them the money to build new hospitals on the condition that they partially own the hospitals, and then have to give them a portion of the profits afterwards. That's like it's more complicated than that, but that's basically like private finance in exchange for profit. There's a lot of compromises that came with that weren't always great. PFI has like been a massive like noose around hospitals ever since, that still to this day. But at the end of the day, for the patients, the outcomes, waiting times at the record low. So a bit of reform, but also a lot of money. You do need the money because at the end of the day, you do need more hospitals. You know, my hospital of Worcester, where my mum comes from, where I spent most of my childhood, is far too small. As a result, even if everything was perfect, it still can't fit because it was built as a city hospital and not as a county hospital, even though Worcester is the capital of Worcestershire, the county. And so it's just understaffed. Even if it was working perfect, there's still not enough hospital beds for the population of the area. You're always going to run into long wait times, not enough space for doctors to perform surgeries. You need hospital expansion. You need more money for stuff like that. And only money can provide that. No amount of reform can provide extra hospital beds, extra rooms for doctors to do operations. But I agree, a bit of reform, but also I wouldn't discount money because you do need money to expand the NHS. You know, you need the 40 new hospitals that were planned. You need stuff like that, otherwise and we know that's true because we look at previous governments that have done things like the Blair government. They put in records amounts of public spending into the NHS and it delivered results.
But at the cost of what? Because there has to be balance now. Like I said, are we still recording? Or?
Yeah, you're still recording.
Yeah.
So, like I said, at the cost of what? Because I remember seeing a news interview with some Chinese representative, and they said it plainly as I just said it. Britain doesn't compete in terms of manufacturing. They don't compete in terms of population. They don't compete in terms of economic output. They don't compete in any way, shape, or form.
I mean, service industries, they definitely do. Britain's known for, like, banking,
and that's the only thing. And
digital
that's
AI.
No, we can't say that. But before we even get onto that, Britain does not compete they're waging war.
Mm.
But if you look at where Britain spends their money, other than, and we had this in debate side about social care, other than the Department of Welfare and Pensions, the Department of Health is like a fire that you're throwing gasoline on. They keep being given more and more money. Other areas of the government in the country, education, I could keep on going, are very well documented to be underfunded. Nobody cares, but the NHS still talking about they need more money.
Well, I suppose it's because healthcare is a vital part of everything works. If people, because I think, like, for example, let's take economic growth. At the moment, we have the most highest number of people who are on like sick leave or have been sick since NHS like records began. There's a record result of people who are taking sick pay. Why is that? A lot of people, it takes months, takes years to get the appointment. And I know someone who had knee surgery, had to wait 3 years for an appointment. He couldn't move in that period. You know, he couldn't be economically productive. He couldn't get a job. He couldn't do his job anymore. He wanted to resign. Had lived 3 years on benefits. And then after those 3 years, was finally able to get his knee surgery. Then he could go back. He wanted to work, but he literally couldn't. You know, the people who go off work for mental health reasons and don't come back because it can take, 2 years to get an NHS, therapist and a counsellor to actually start working you through it and getting you back. When ideally they'd be seen the next day, or the next week or something like that. I think that's one of the key examples of like NHS stuff helps productivity in every, take the alternative in the United States. I know a lot of people who stay in dead-end jobs, unproductive companies, because they have really good health insurance. They don't want to move to a better job because they don't want to lose their health insurance. This kind of universal healthcare system means it doesn't depend on your job. You can go for whatever job you want, be more economically productive, do better. You can take a risk. You can start a private company. You start a private company, you don't have to worry about suddenly you have to pay for your own healthcare. Start a private company here. Don't have to worry about that. That encourages entrepreneurship in a different way. You can take a bigger risk. So I think healthcare is the foundation of an economy, because if people there's not a kind of like safety net for people, then it reduces the amount of risks they can take to start their own businesses, to move to a different job. If you don't have a productive welfare system, it can't get people actually like into work, for like helping them through their mental trauma, physical ailments, stuff like that, really. So I think so it does come at a cost, but I think it pays back in dividends to the health of the overall economy. If we didn't have that, you'd have the kind of stuff you have in the US.
Fair enough. That's a point that I'll have to take and reflect on. Is there anything you want to ask us anyway, like about anything that we've been
Sure
doing?
thing. What made you start the podcast? What was the inspiration then?
Right,
We're waiting for this one.
I forgot I was going to tell you that. So basically, I know we know each other through Debate Society, but
Love
maybe
debate.
that was...
You guys should join.
Maybe that was some of the inspiration, but as I've said before, essentially, all my life I've been that guy that just sounds like I talk the most nonsense. I'm looking for... That's what people say about me anyway. But so I joined Debate Society. And one day, while I'm in second year, I'm chilling with some friends. I'm chilling with one friend in particular. He takes me to Mackey's to meet another one of our mutual friends. And as a surprise, they want to bring me to this place. And we meet another friend that I've maybe seen around once or twice. So that's the four of us now. It's this girl. And we're all having a conversation, but they're more familiar with it than I am. And she's talking about her mental health and going to counselling and this, that, and other. She's talking about all these things. And I'm sort of like listening, engaging. I'm asking her, and this is quite intimate. It's about things that have gone in her life. It's about It's about getting counselling, which is not something people talk about or it's not something people even do. We have a hindrance or a hesitance to speak to somebody about how we're feeling. I'm asking her about it. We're having it, and by the end of the night, I just think to them, like, because it's an idea I've had. I think, guys, I want to start a podcast. That girl was my first guest. You can check it out on the channel. And he was my second guest, close friend. He was running a couple different business ideas, and he had an events company, and he was very linked to other people. He was very articulate, opinionated guy, very motivated. We started working together. We went to do an interview with a guy that we know called Skinny. He makes music, talks about the music industry, conspiracies, the UK. We went to Nottingham to link up with these people who were like 17, 18, started their own clothing brand in Nottingham Trent University.
We've met many people.
We've met,
Yeah, you get around.
And we met you. He met
Variety.
you. It sparks our ability to like. Me, I'm a people person.
You like hearing different perspectives, I guess. Yeah.
I don't care like obviously you're not gonna like everyone's perspective in it. Somebody could come along now and say to me, slavery was beneficial or whatever in it. But I like conversation. I like people. I like talking. And
Didn't expect to hear that today.
this tickles that part of me. It tickles that part of us, and yeah, that's how we started.
Not the slavery bit, I guess, but everything else.
Everyone's got a different opinion, you know, and
Yeah.
some of the episodes we dropped, we say things that some people are not gonna like to hear. Like
we're
had
comfortable with the uncomfortable, essentially.
but that's not something you see today, especially on university campuses, especially in schools and in workplaces and
Everyone tries to conform.
Yeah, I think we have lost the ability to talk to each other, and I've always been interested in hearing different perspectives. You know, I'm friends with the president of the Conservative Society on this campus, and we don't agree on barely anything. But I think in some ways I'd rather join the Conservative Society than the Labour Society, because then I'd find different perspectives and challenge them rather than going to a space where we all agree together. And
but echo chambers is how the site we have now is built.
And that's about it. And because if we don't talk to each other, problems can't be solved. The US being a key example of that, they've lost the ability to talk. Now nothing happens because there's no negotiation or anything. It's no or yes.
Do you know, I thought you wanted to be an MP. Or maybe you've said it, or I thought you wanted to be an MP, but now you're talking about going to America.
There's always Congress, you know. There's always other things to do. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you never know where your life is going to go to. I went to the US because it sounded fun, basically. Didn't know I'd ended up meeting someone I loved over there and wanting to actually move there.
Yeah.
You know, life takes you on a different path when you least expect it.
How is that like? Because we have like a relationship problem right now in Gen Z. Are you Gen Z?
I'm Gen Z, yeah.
Just
I'm not
about.
that old, guys. It's okay.
just about on the brink.
So
no,
he's 22, I'm 21, you're 24.
Yeah, I'm well into Gen. I think millennial was like 96 or something, isn't it?
Okay,
Below.
okay.
I think like some people in the 90s count as Gen Z.
Oh,
Which I didn't realize. I thought it was 2000s plus.
Yeah. But yeah, so we do have a relationship problem in Gen Z. And one of the biggest issues is around like trust and between men and women. And even men and women hate each other right now. And I don't know if you've heard of Red Pill, there's a lot of high value men. There's a lot of
Into
high
culture
value women
and
and a lot of like, how do you even like, how can you even be engaged to somebody across the pond that is there no sense of paranoia, or what is that like?
Well, it's about trust. Yeah, at the end of the day, if it's like, I knew her when I was over there anyway. So I know, I've met her family, I've met everyone, I know what she's like. I spent many months together before I went back here. At the end of the day, it's about trust. If you don't trust your partner to be, because you can never be with your partner 100% of the time. That's not humanly possible, and if it was possible, that's a bit weird. You shouldn't spend 100% of your time with your partner. That's extremely unhealthy. Nobody recommends that. So, if you don't trust your partner, then a relationship can't be built on anything. You don't trust them. The relationships need to be built on trust. I trust my partner. She trusts me. Yeah. We have separate time together, but then we also have a lot of time together. In some ways, I have more time with her than I do as someone who might have their partner here, because when we spend time together, we spend 2, 3, 4 months together the entire time, and then time apart. Probably this year, we've probably spent about 6 months together in total, when that's been living together, coming home every day and seeing each other, and then 6 months apart. So, and obviously we're planning to close that in the end. But yeah, I think eventually it's just about trust. If you don't trust your partner, then but I definitely think there is not so much like an entirely Gen Z problem, but
not entirely Gen Z, but I think Gen Z is probably like the least likely to get married or to consider marriage.
But yeah,
there's a lot of, when I'm scrolling through, what is this, TikTok and stuff?
Yeah, TikTok.
When you're scrolling through it, it's a lot of a happily married man when he hears about a 2-man or stuff about never get married. Or have you heard of the Hakimi method?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. It just makes me like think to hear you say that. Because I really did think you were going to try to become some sort of MP in your area. And now you're talking about you're going to go to America and live with your happily ever after. That shocked me.
Yeah. It shocked me as well. I definitely didn't think that when I was going over there.
When you're like kind of 19, 20, 21, 22, it's good to like, just in a way, to an extent, take life where it takes you, because like you're never really going to be that age.
Yeah, it's a feeling for me. It really was. I'd been with different relationships with different people before, but as soon as we got together, I knew that was it. Something clicked. Something told me that this person was the one. The feelings I felt for her, I felt like nobody else.
Wow.
You know, I'm quite an introvert person. You know,
Really?
I know people that I think I've got a lot of extroverted tendencies, but that's you have to in my kind of work. Really, I like reading books in quiet spaces. You know, but like, you know, like that. But being with her, it just clicked and it worked, and I found like this is the person for me, and I felt feelings for them I hadn't felt for anybody else before, and I don't really know entirely where those came from, but they just did, and then it just worked from there, and we were compatible. So
Had you had like relationships with the UK as well?
I've had like, let me think, probably one relationship in the UK when I was here,
Fair enough.
before then, and then just it's a feeling, and it just kind of worked from there. So we never really know what's going to happen, and I don't think you can't explain love. It's not scientific. It's just one day I was single, and then a few days later I wasn't, and then and then a few more days, months after that, love came from that, and I knew that this person was the one, and then sooner or later we were talking about engagement and then marriage, and it just kind of comes from there. I can't really explain or give anyone advice on how it happened, just apart from treating people right and respecting people is the best way to do it, and talking and engaging with people. You know, the big thing, the reason I got a date with her to begin with was because she told me I was one of the few people who'd actually asked her questions because I was on a dating app, because I was bored. I wanted to, you know, and she was a bit bored as well. Dating app, and apparently I was one of the few people who asked her questions, like not just harassing them or asking them very sort of inappropriate questions. I was asking her questions like, "What do you like doing? What's your family like? How are you today? I hope you're doing okay." And it might be a bit basic, but on a dating app where like women have to wade through like toxic, you know, men on there, it can be difficult.
Feminist, right? Okay. I actually do want to ask you this though. People say that the UK is like a miserable country, and everyone's almost like trying to escape. Somebody even said that in the UK they have a. Have you heard of risk aversion?
Yeah.
So if you try to bring in a new idea in the UK, maybe like an iPhone or electricity, they will automatically and deliberately try to shun you, because that's how British culture is. Do you think, like, you visited America, do you think the UK is miserable? Do you prefer America?
In comparison, I suppose you would say yes, but
What's your experience?
It does come with caveats. So I'd say like yes, and like an outward sense. People in the US are much more. I speak from my experience of California and living in Virginia. So like not the entirety of the US. People in New York are much more like people in the UK. Very similar. People in Virginia, California, much more friendly in different ways. Much more happier, much more upbeat. So in some ways, in some parts of the US, yes, that is true. But it does come with caveats. You know, for example, at least British. You know, one of the things that is good about the UK is at least we're an honest country. You know, if someone comes up to you and says, "Oh, you know, I think you've made a mistake here," they'll be very honest with the mistake that you made, and they'll explain to you what the mistake was and how it made them feel.
Right.
People are very honest. People are very willing to come up to you, I think, at least in the UK, in my experience, and tell you what you've done wrong. In the US, for example, in the South, in Virginia, they have a whole thing of Southern hospitality where even if they like don't like you, they'll still invite you around for dinner and have you. You know, I've been around people's houses in the US for dinner, and I know for a fact they don't like me, but they'll still have me around. Oh, like their friends if they've told me, you know, like
they don't like you.
Yeah, like, but they'll still invite you around.
Why wouldn't someone like you?
Be like, it's a good question. But like, you know, people could not like you, but still like be so lovely to you, pretend they're your friend, invite you around for dinner.
It's a lot of fakeness.
No, it's like Southern hospitality. It's all because they're very hospitable.
Respect.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the counter. But like, that's what I mean. Like, at least it comes with a caveat of British people are honest. American people go more hospitable and friendly, but it does come with the caveat of sometimes you don't know where you stand with them because they can be so friendly to you, and then obviously behind the scenes they might not be, but they'll always be friendly to you. So it comes with caveats, but I definitely think in some way it's a balance, is what I'd say. Really, you know, you don't want to live in a society where everyone's completely fake, but equally it would be nice if people were. I think the big difference probably is like optimism. People in the US just believe in things a lot more, believe in themselves, believe in their ability to do things.
It's the American dream, isn't it?
Yeah, well, kind of, yeah. Like like people believe, you know, there's the whole thing of like people in the US believe more than anyone else that they can become billionaires. People believe in their own ability to do things rightfully or wrongfully, and there's an optimism to like throw themselves into everything. You know, people in the US work longer hours than people in Europe. One of the reasons is people are just far more optimistic and passionate about what they do. You know, work in the US, a lot of the things it's fine.
I've seen that meme. It was this meme of some European people dancing on a boat.
Yeah.
And the Americans were like, Americans don't realize you work for free time, whereas Europeans view it as you give your free time to work.
Yeah, like, there's a trade-off. I think in the US they've made the calculation subconsciously that they want higher wages and higher living standards. In Europe, they've made the opposite one, which is they want more free time.
You think Europeans don't have lower living standards in America?
They do. I mean, US houses are bigger. They've got more technological appliances. The kind of safety.
We have cleaner water.
That's true in some ways, but not in most cases in the US. What I mean is, and this took me a long time to understand myself, is just like in terms of like the amount of money that the average American family has to spend, they have far more money.
Income.
Yeah, the amount of disposable income, they have far more. The houses are bigger. They can afford more vehicles. They can afford more, if they get the free time, more holidays. They can afford more just gadgets, expensive food.
No, they can't. The proportion of Americans that don't have a passport, that's why they get.
No, but I was admit you can go on holiday in the US. You don't need a passport. The reason they don't have a passport is for lots of interesting reasons that we can go into. But like, that's nothing to do with like wealth. If that like
a lot of America. Okay, you can go on holiday. I can go on holiday in Brighton. But more British people, more British people have been to France, Spain. How many white British people I can find that have been to Spain like 20 times? You can say the same thing about a French person. In the UK and Europe, we have a.
There is a but.
How many climates are there?
There is a but. There is a
program
called. There's a but that's coming.
Let me land.
Okay, go on.
I've met European students here. They talk about something called an Erasmus. It's encouraged to go abroad and go on holiday to broaden your horizons, to get experiences in Europe, and to breathe fresh, natural air in Europe and. To go, it's not as if Europeans don't have this, but Americans is work.
There is a but coming, which is you have to view it in comparison. So, for example, the difference between here and France.
Yes, geography.
Is much,
I get it.
You know, if you're an American that you live in the mid. So, for example, when I wanted to go visit California, it took me like a 12-hour flight to go from Britain to California. You know, by comparison, if I wanted to go visit a different country in Britain. Just have to go an hour away, if not less, and you can get there.
I wonder what the flight is from like California to New York as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's a flight across that is more than
a lot of Americans don't even do that.
So, for example, if you want to go skiing, let's say you want to go skiing in the UK, you'd probably have to go to like, a cold Switzerland. In the US, you want to go skiing, you just go to Montana. You just go, well, probably not Montana actually, but you'd find a state that was cold, Wisconsin.
So you can almost there's almost every type of climate.
Yeah, and that's my
point.
Don't
get me wrong. There's privileges that we get that they can't get because for them to go to France.
Yeah, I agree.
Cost themselves.
But like
but an American might not go to Mexico.
The only point I was making was like materially Americans are better off,
understand.
And I think that's obviously there's caveats to that of like the healthcare is worse. We have closer access to the rest of the world, easier access. We get more time off, which is a benefit of itself. But like materially they're better off. But obviously the question is that worth it? It's an open question. Would you rather be materially better off, or would you rather be less well off, but obviously at the expense of you've got more free time? Look at universities, right? In American universities have multi-million-pound things. I went to university in the US. So much stuff was just free for me. The gym was free. There was free food everywhere. Free. You got like an entirely new outfit paid for by the university. They paid you like £500 a year just to be there. $500, should I say, just to be there. But like that's in exchange for worse healthcare, worse transport, no time, much less time off. It all costs and benefits really.
What in your experience at least? What did you prefer?
It's hard to say. I can't say because I've only, when I lived the life of a student in the US.
You lived the life of a student in the US and a student in the UK. What would you prefer? So I'm trying to cop out. Really, just answer the question.
Okay. I don't think I've lived enough to know that like I don't think anything is better. Like there's costs and benefits to both. There's things I enjoyed in both, and that is true. Like I can give you examples. Like in the UK,
like a true politician.
I like the fact that there's a students' union here who can advocate. In the US, there wasn't a students' union.
They don't have that.
No, they have student government associations, but the university pays their salary. So they're basically like the friendly student people who are like, hello, we love the university. I'll put it, if the Nishan, the vice chancellor of this university, did something terrible, the students' union would block all communications with them. They'd go full scorched earth. They'd go crazy. Like the students' union has the legal authority in the capital to back themselves up and take on the university in a real fight.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, the students' union's a multi-million-pound institution.
So the SUs in every university.
Yeah.
I thought they were just for show.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, yeah, we can stand up to them if we need to. You know, we have like
Why does that exist in UK education?
Well, I mean, it goes for both ways, obviously, to stand up for the student, but I think the best thing the student, if you want, like, why does the university support the students' union? Because they get benefits. So, for example, the students' union has a lot of money that it tucks into advice service that then gives students and prevents them from dropping out, ensuring they stay at the university and complete their studies, ensuring the university gets more money, because otherwise those students would drop out. You know, support. So, for example, students accused of academic misconduct, your students' union helps them get through that, stay on the university, bat off the universities, because the welfare services that come from the students' union, so the students' communities that the students' union invests like over £100,000 a year into student activities, ensuring that, you know, because we know that if a student doesn't have a student community, their chance of dropping out massively increase. But if you're in a society, if you're in a community, if you meet people, your chance of dropping out go lower. So there's every incentive for the university to support.
That's cool, but what I mean is the concept of, because like unions, people when they understand union,
you mean like,
you have a job.
Yeah.
You have the union which protects workers. Unions are formed by the government, and I'm assuming Labour governments. I'm assuming anyway. But where does the concept of a student union come from?
I mean, essentially, so the student union started off exactly the same as trade union, like exactly the same. You had to pay a levy to go into it. Students had the choice. As they've gone on, the same way as Thatcher destroyed what unions used to be able to do, they were traded off in favour of, but they became institutional. So the government was like, it's a good thing that unions exist to advocate for students, but they took away the union's ability to for example, now student unions can only do stuff to protect students as students, so they can't. So for example, our student union legally couldn't go, you know what, we want to stand up against the university because they're enabling genocide in Gaza. We're not allowed to do that. We're not allowed to do, because that would go against the charitable purpose of the students' union. So they got slightly depoliticized, but we are still a union in terms of defending students. So let's take the pro-Palestine students who got arrested by the university. As I said before, we're giving them legal counsel, welfare support, mitigating circumstances support, resources to be able to protest in a non-destructive way if they choose to. Things like that, really. So we do stand up for our members, whether rightfully or wrongly, whether we support them or not. That's the role of the union. So if a student's accused of academic misconduct, even if we know for a fact, I'm trying to have a doubt that student definitely has done that, we'll still stand with them, because that is what we do. Because that's what a union does. It stands for its members, even if they disagree with them, because that's what a students' union does. So it's not just for show. We do stand. If a student is accused of doing something, we stand with. So, for example, if a student has a complaint, if the university goes, the student needs to get kicked out, we'll help them write the counter argument.
So, if I wanted to start a university, do I need to have a student union?
Legally, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, legally, the Education Act of maybe 1983, whatever date it is, it says, the Education Act says there must be a students' union that exists legally separate from the university. Obviously, what form that takes is different. It could just be one person in a room in a box. It's not like that anywhere, but it could be. But the university has to have some kind of student voice, and that's beneficial for everyone: the students, the university, everything. Because there's some things that the university just can't do.
Fair enough.
It's a big bureaucratic machine at the end of the day with 30,000, almost 40,000 employees. Not 40,000. 4,000 employees. The Students' Union is an institution of 30 staff members if in the office, plus 100 students on payroll. It's a lot more nimble to be able to do stuff. So, often, even when the university wants to do the same thing, they just can't match our efficiency. For example, little kind of insider knowledge. So, for example, the university once looked at doing a mentoring scheme for students. They came back with a massive crash quote of hundreds of thousands of pounds. The Students' Union was like, we can do the same thing with £50,000. The exact same scheme, but they're just more efficient because it's smaller. They're able to just sort it out.
Fair enough. Do you want to wrap things there? Or?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
I think, we got...
thanks very much, guys. Almost 2 hours of footage.
Yeah, wow. Which is good. That's what the usual podcasts are like. So we'll need to...
It's been fun.
Yeah.
Definitely.